Hey everybody, welcome back to Bug Proletariat 40K. So I covered last week my Twisted Helix list that I was going to take to the Maryland Open. It ended up being roughly like an 80-person major at Tables and Towers in Westminster, Maryland. I had an awesome time bringing my Gene Stealer cult there and seeing a bunch of people I haven't played Warhammer against in a while and hanging out with some of my buddies. Definitely a big thanks to Don, the guy that puts on the tournament organizer every year. He does a great job of putting on the biggest and best tournament in the Maryland area. And if anybody, it's going to happen in May next year at Tables and Towers. They're already going to start selling tickets pretty soon. I'll put a link to the website down in my description of the video. If anybody's looking for an awesome game store that they've never been to before, or they're looking to try and get into Tournament 40K, all the way up to the veteran gamers, we have all levels of skill come to the MDO, and it's so much fun and just such a well-run organization and event. I can't recommend it more highly. So I had a great time, and thanks again to Nick, the TO. He was the only TO for the event, running around like a chicken with his head cut off, helping out everybody, making sure the round times went somewhat on time. I don't know. People couldn't finish their games. It was wild to me. I don't understand why not everyone in this day and age is using a chess clock, but that's a different video. So as you guys know, if you watched my last video, I took my Twisted Helix 30 Pure Strain list, and the weekend didn't go quite as well as I'd hoped. I went 2-3 and 1 tie, but just going to go over some of my general tips that I learned over the weekend, just playing 6 straight games with this list and how it performed in the meta, and just my luck. A lot of the games just don't matter, right? Because now Nephilim's out. So many things have changed. The balanced data slate, points changed, even all the secondaries have got a big tweak. So I'm really going to look at this in a huge bird's eye view, I guess, a bigger scale, macro scale, as opposed to looking at some of the smaller stuff like how my list did or how I thought certain units performed, because I think that's all going to be different here now with Warzone Nephilim. So coming into the event, I was joking with my buddies before the first round that I just didn't want to play Tau. My Twisted Helix list is very much 30 Gene Stealers, some drills, a couple rock grinders, and it's very much get in your face, and I'm going to come at you and hit you as hard as I can with my melee punch. And if that doesn't work out, there's not a lot I can do. And Tau just don't let me play that game with the suits that can come in and deep strike and clear me off pretty easily. And round 1, I drew Andrew Gagno's Tau list, which I feel like is even a worse list than a normal Tau Crisis suit spam, because he had 2 of the Tau planes. And as he was shooting me off the board, we were kind of joking, and I was like, what could I have even done? And he was like, I don't know, this is a dumpster fire for you. And then I told him I kind of debated my plan to play when I was going to play a Tau player would be to kind of castle up, use the big ruin that you see there that's completely line of sight blocking to hide most of my army behind, and wait until they had to commit those crisis suits, using my jackals to push them back outside their effective range, where they couldn't come down within that 18 inches and just like murder things. And when I saw his list actually had the 2 planes in it, I knew that just wasn't going to work. Turn 1, he just flip-flopped the positions of the planes. I kind of hit as best I could. He flew the planes over. My unit of 3 Ridge Runners knocked one of his planes down to 1 wound. And Tau have a act on full strat. He used that and started blasting my screens away. So when those crisis suits did come in, they were going to have targets to shoot at, and that was kind of all. We played like 3 turns, and it just wasn't worth playing out the game at that point. There were definitely things I could have done. I just think this Twisted Helix list just, hands down was not an answer to the meta that was going to be there. There were a bunch of Tau players. I was going to have to play one if I wanted to do very well, and I kind of should have took that into consideration when building my Gene Stealer cults list. The Twisted Helix list was really, really good into like melee marines, into sisters, and a bunch of other good things in the meta, but it just was never going to stand up to a Tau gun line. For my second game, I paired into a Deathwing Dark Angels list with I think 40 Terminators, and this is the reverse of my Tau game, right? This is where Twisted Helix shines. He has a bunch of small squads of Terminators And yeah, I can only wound him on 4s because of the Deathwing, but I have so many attacks, I have so many units that I can just. And what happened during the game was he committed some of his Deathwing to try and come over to an objective, and I just clogged him up with Gene Stealers. He doesn't have enough attacks as long as you're rolling, average on those 4-up invuln saves to kill him that fast. And I'm going to hold the objectives to the majority of the game while I score my secondaries, and he's just not going to be able to. It doesn't matter that those Terminators were OBSEC, I just have more models. As long as I tow one OBSEC model onto the objective with the Gene Stealers, I'm still going to hold it generally. And that just ended up what was happening. So I was 1-1. And then my third game, I paired into Freebooters Orcs, which I played before with my Necrons last year. So I knew and there's a picture of the gun line of Freebooters. So I knew they could really, really put out a lot of shots. And again, just like my Tau matchup, I did not have an answer for this. The Gene Stealers aren't really that good at killing those buggies. If they're T7, T6, even with the Strength 5 Twisted Helix, they're still wounding on 5s. And that's just a lot of your lethality gone right off the bat. So I played around a couple turns, trying to be cute and tag the vehicles. But the funny thing about the Orc vehicles are they're still very good in close combat with a bunch of attacks. And even though they're not really high quality attacks, Gene Stealer Cult doesn't really care about that, and they get punched off just as easily. So I got tabled by this player. And as you can see on the top left corner there, he also had planes, so I could not hide. So we'll talk about that a little later as the things that I learned. So ending the day, 1-2 was not how I wanted it in the day, but I rallied. I definitely was coming back for day 2, just trying to pull it out because day 2 was 3 games as well. And actually, because my game went so fast, round 3, I got to do stream and commentate for the top table in game 3, and I put a link to that below. And it's the whole day 1 of the MDO. I come on out for the 4-hour, 49-minute mark. If you want to check out the game, it's really good against Emperor's Children versus Biletan Eldar, which is kind of an off-meta list against one of the heavier hitters in the meta at that point in Eldar, and it's a really, really cool game with a lot of trading back and forth. So then I came into day 2, and I get right off the bat 27 Sanguinary Guard Blood Angels list against a guy he played Ultramarines last year, and I played him, I believe, at the last MDO. And he played it pretty well, was very, very conservative. Unlike the last time I played the 27 Sangard list, he didn't just put them out in the middle and let me kind of pick them apart. He was very, very conservative with them, realizing that I had more close combat units to bear than he could, so I could kind of double up on his units. So we ended up playing the cagey game in the center, trading units back and forth. I made a huge mistake in this game that probably could have won the game. Instead we tied, just because I was using things like lying in the wait and other units running onto objectives with my OBSEC, and just making sure I was denying him a lot of primary points. And at one point I had a chaplain and the Death Company holding the center objective, and I really didn't want my the chaplain that he had to fight the Gene Stealers and they were in combat with first. But also I had a squad of 15 drills that were going to charge into the Death Company, and I just didn't really plan out my turn effectively, and I put a crossfire marker on the chaplain, thinking that maybe I could shoot the Death Company with something, and then I'll get a crossfire marker on them as well to decide who I want to fight last in the fight phase. And I just ended up actually not getting a crossfire marker on those Death Company, and those were absolutely the more important unit to throw that crossfire marker on from the Nexos. So now I made the chaplain fight last, but it utterly did not matter. Those Death Company slapped the 15 unit of Acolytes with 6 drills and killed them to the man. And that unit of 15 did nothing this game. So that was like playing a 1750 game against the full 2000s of the Blood Angels, just purely out of my stupidity and not thinking through the turn. So my next game was into an Orc Goth list with a bunch of knobs. And this was a hold 2, hold 3, and unfortunately for my opponent, he just didn't have a lot of OBSEC on the board. And the couple of boys squads that were OBSEC that he had, and the approach of his list was just charge his opponent with as many big Mega Knobs, summon trucks, and some of the Squigosaurs, and just getting into them really quickly and just have some boys in the back to kind of hold us back objectives. So my Gene Stealers just fought the knobs that were trying to come at me very quickly and killed some and then died in turn. But really what won me this game was my units in the backfield being able to charge with the 3d6, pick the 2 highest, proficient planning to knock all the boys off the board by turn 2, so he couldn't hold any of his backfield objectives unless he wanted to turn his knobs around and go back, which he decided, I think rightfully so, to just he could have pushed me off my objectives and then we could just trade table sides. It didn't work out. My Patriarch, the Twisted Helix Patriarch, was an absolute monster in this game, just killing characters, killing tons of mech boys, and killing Mega Knobs. He was awesome. So I'm going into my last game with 2 wins, 2 losses, and a tie, and I would have been really pumped to come out of this 3-2 and 1 tie. I paired into another actually FLG content creator. He does the editing for the Thursday show, Nick, and his Death Guard, and we had an awesome game. I think this is my favorite game of the tournament. It was very back and forth. Trading things, he's so tough. I just have a ton of models, and it was a 5 objective mission with a objective in the center of the table. So we were playing a trading game on there. And I really think what lost me the game in this one, I got a little too cute with my Gene Stealer cult. I spent the CB to pick up the 15-man, and they made a charge at a deep strike onto his home objective, taking it away from him. But then he didn't really need that objective back right away. He just piled onto the center objective and made sure he held 2, and then eventually pushed into my objectives. And he's obviously a lot tougher than I am with his Death Guard, so we had more units left at the end of the game to score those late game points. What I definitely should have done was realize that his backfield objective did not matter. It really only mattered who held that center objective to get Stranglehold, hold more, and piled on not just the 20 Gene Stealers that I threw out there, but also my 15-man Roxall unit and my Patriarch, and just held on to that objective with everything I had. So that was just a real quick overview of my 6 games, and I just went over them so quickly because the details just do not matter now with Warzone Nephilim out there, with the CP changes, the points changes, balanced data slate, and now the new missions. Everything, it's a brand new meta. It's a brand new game starting the next tournament that you go to. So I'm just going to give some tips that I took away from playing the 6 games with Twisted Helix and the GSC overall that will transfer over to the new Warzone Nephilim book. The first one is, even in my games where I did really, really well, I almost got tabled. Like, our army is extremely fragile and extremely easy. So if you make a tiny mistake, or a mistake that a more forgiving army can bounce back from, GSC are not going to bounce back from it. You're going to lose the game. You might not lose by a lot, or you might tie instead of win like I did against the Blood Angels player. But playing this army is like playing 40k on hard mode, because you have really cool tricks, you have really cool strats that you can use. Your melee output's really good, use some decent shooting, but you're so fragile and you have really nothing to make you more resilient, especially now with Nephilim, where the 30 aberrants in Bladed Cog is basically dead, unless you start with no CP and don't take any warlord traits or a relic. That you need to take that second before your turn and think about what's important, how you're going to stay alive. What are you going to use that fight's last on? It should be the Death Company instead of the Chaplain. Just prior planning in this army is gigantic, which is fitting, I guess, for the fluff. Another thing that'll really help is you don't want to play 5 turns with Gene Stealer Cult against your opponent. If your opponent gets to attack you and do his thing for 5 turns, you're going to lose. You're not going to have an army. Yeah, you might score a ton of points because Gene Stealer Cult is just going to get their points. But if they pick good secondaries against you, like no prisoners, or even assassinate. Sometimes they can just get in there and kill your characters if you've taken too many of them, or if they've gotten into your home objective and you can't stop them. They're going to have that nice, good third secondary to take against you, because it's hard to build a GSC list that doesn't give up, something. So the way you mitigate playing those turns is, and I was guilty of this in at least 2 of my games, you might have 30 pure strains, you might have, some acolytes that want to bound out of trucks. Don't give your opponent the opportunity to counterattack your units. Go out there, really learn and to best utilize that Return to the Shadow strat for 1 CP after you've killed something. Now you have to make sure you're going to kill it, that you can go back into Deep Strike, but that's a unit you're going to have on the board later that you otherwise wouldn't have, which for GSC is incredibly important. There's no need to throw out, like I did in a game, 20 Gene Stealers in turn 1 to not really accomplish a lot. Yeah, this is actually the game right here against the Speed Freaks. Yeah, I locked down some turn 1 shooting, but it didn't ultimately matter. I could have just hid those Gene Stealers and had the same effect by using terrain and not trading 20 Gene Stealer bodies for 1 less turn of orc shooting. So there's nothing wrong with, on that first turn, throwing out a unit of bikes to get, well, not your Stranglehold anymore, but maybe to get your Brood Swarm if you've gone first, and just sitting in your deployment zone if you're safe, and saying, this is a turn that I'm not interacting with my opponent, but I can still get my R&D, I can still get my Brood Swarm points early, and I can, play 4 turns now. He doesn't have 5 turns of damage, he only has 4 turns of damage coming into me, and that now I might not get tabled and have units on the table at the end to win. Another thing I learned was you have to build for the meta if you want to do really, really well, and I just didn't with my Twisted Helix list. Sure, the Twisted Helix list was really good in Armor Contempt. It's awesome against another, melee trading army, and against like that Blood Angels list, it played really, really well, and if I just didn't make one big mistake, I come away with the win there. Played awesome into Deathwing, even though they're extremely tough. They're just slow, melee. But my list had no answer for my opponent had 2 planes. Those planes, I had 1 unit of Ridge Runners. As soon as they were dead, my opponent's planes had free reign to fly around the table and just smoke my units. And you need to look at your list before you go to a tournament and just think about what's popular in the meta. Obviously, Tau is popular, not so much the planes, but even one of my units of Gene Stealers are very fast. It's not killing those Crisis Suits. They can fall back and shoot in combat. I didn't have a lot of answers for that matchup. I definitely had no answer for like the plane matchup, and maybe I didn't need one. I could have played around it, but it just makes it so much harder. So just look at your list, look at what's being played in your local meta, and there's nothing wrong to build your list to suit the meta that you're going to go play in. That's what all really good tournament players do, and what you should do as well, especially when you're playing an army like Gene Stealer Cult that's not easy to play in the first place. In my next video, I'm probably going to actually just put it out tomorrow if I get a chance to record it. I'm going to talk about how I think the new Warzone Nephilim changes affect GSC and where we land. I know a lot of people are bummed out, and I'm definitely bummed out too that we didn't get any points updates. We didn't get anything in the balanced data slate. It's wild to me. Like, yeah, we were right around like a 50% win rate from the last thing that I saw, but it's, GSC like is not podiuming anywhere. I said that completely wrong, but they're not getting the top of any tournaments. It's really tough. GSC, pre-Nephilim definitely could win an RTT, even a small GT if you lucked out with the matchups. You would have to avoid probably Tau, but you could definitely beat Tyranids. You could beat Eldar, because Eldar's hard to play, just like GSC. There's better, in my opinion. But now with all these other armies getting some buffs, and to be fair, Tau, Eldar, Tyranids getting toned down a little bit, it'll be interesting to see where GSC falls in the meta. I do think people's secondaries is going to be the biggest shakeup. If you were one of the factions like Necrons or some of the Space Marine factions that got just outrageous secondaries, it's going to give you such a leg up against the competition. And GSC did not get outrageous secondaries, in my opinion. Brute Swarm is awesome. That's probably getting taken every single game and is going to be over 10 points easily. Sabotage critical locations, that's still hot garbage. You should never ever take it for any reason. If you play against a smart opponent, you will score like no points from it. And then our ambush secondary got better with the 2 points for an exposed unit and 2 points for a unit coming in from ambush. But it's so unreliable. You can't gauge accurately how many points you're going to score on that in a game. So I don't like to take secondaries like that where I can't kind of project my score. Like, I know I'm getting 12 for R&D. When I played Stranglehold, I could look at my opponent's army and go, I'm getting 9 or 12 for this. And if things go real well, I'm getting 15. And now you just can't do that as GSC. Now, Psychic Interrogation is still extremely good, and that's why I always take the 2 Psychers in my lists. But that's not something you can take every single game. So that third spot is now a flex, and if ambush is the answer, I don't like that, unfortunately. So everybody, thanks for listening, and hopefully some of the more macro level GSC ideas, just a couple ideas here, will help you out in your games coming up in Warzone Nephilim. And tomorrow I'll put out the video of some of the broad things I think GSC can do to stay relevant and stay positive going into the new missions. I'm playing a game against my buddy's Eldar tomorrow. He's still playing the Hail of Doom or Blade, whatever the Shuriken one is. He's still going to play that, which I think is still the best for Eldar, so that'll be a good test. I'm actually playing an Industrial Affinity list that I'm switching over to. I saw, I believe his name is Eric Lathuris in Australia. I was just looking through BCP today, and I was like, that's a good list. I think he went 3-0 recently in a tournament with it, and kind of inspired me to switch over to the Industrial thing. I'm going to see how it works out. And on Monday, I'm going to play some Black Templars that my buddy has. So I'll get a few games in, and then release the video actually, not tomorrow. So I have some actual experience and things to say from experience instead of just in my brain. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. And if you enjoy the GSC content, feel free to subscribe to the channel. It's coming out like once every 2 weeks generally. Hopefully I'm going to do some battle reports soon. It's just been hard with my schedule lately. I have a camera and everything. We have the table set up. Just need to go film a game. All right, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you all next time.